Hi, I'm Vicki Bentley with Everyday Homeschooling, part of Everyday Homemaking, and I get a lot of questions from our gals in our support group about how to get started in homeschooling. So we thought we'd do a Facebook Live, and this is kind of uncharted territory for me here, and it's weird because I'm used to talking to live people. So it would be really nice to know there's anybody out there, but I know some of you will be watching later on. And I'm just going to go through this really quickly, put some questions in the little sidebar over there. Let me know you're here. That would be great. Um, I am speaking to you today as a support group leader for Winchester Moms Night Out, formerly known as Shenandoah Christian Home Educators. This is not legal advice. I'm going to give you some basic information, and you can find more information at the Home Educators Association of Virginia website at heav.org. You can also check out the information at the HSLDA website, Homeschool Legal Defense Association, at hslda.org/mystate, and then look up Virginia. If you're an HSLDA member, then you're also welcome to call in and talk with our legal staff or our consulting staff to help you with getting started or with any of the legal side of things. But just to give you a brief overview, since I'm not seeing any questions, I'm not sure what the specific questions are, so I'll just try to cover a bunch of bases for you here. But just kind of some practical information on some how to homeschool in Virginia basics. So that you'll know you're in good company, those of you who are just getting started. There are over 40,000 homeschooled students on record with the state of Virginia as homeschoolers. That includes those who have filed a notice of intent or those who have notified them that they're religiously exempt as of the end of the 2017 school year. So I think you can probably go to the HEAV website under the legal section and see the DOE statistics on that. They may have something a little newer, but most recent I had was end of 2017, and it was 40,386 students. So you're in good company in the state of Virginia. And I'm just going to cover 10 commonly asked questions here really quickly. Let me see if I can do this. I've got two screens going here, so if you see me looking different places, that's why. The first thing is, a lot of people want to know, what is homeschooling? So basically we're talking about parent-directed, parent-led, parent-funded homeschooling, education at home. A lot of different ways to do that. According to research by Dr. Brian Ray of the National Home Education Research Institute, or NHERI, you can find them at nheri.org, then a lot of families homeschool, big, huge variety. Used to be that a lot of people who homeschooled for religious reasons, but that's not so much the case anymore. Some are religious, some are not. We have all different political persuasions, different income levels, different education levels, different ethnicities as well. In fact, a 2013 study showed that 32% of homeschoolers are Black, Asian, Hispanic, or other non-white minorities. So there are about 2.3 million home-educated students in the United States. So it's continuing to grow at about 2 to 8% a year these past few years. Home-educated students score an average of 15 to 30 percentile points above the public school students on standardized achievement tests. Now, you and I know that those nationally normed standardized achievement tests aren't the be-all and end-all, but that tends to be what we get rated on, so just wanted to throw that out to you. Also, a 2015 study showed that Black homeschool students score 23 to 42 percentile points above public school students, African-American students. And that's another study from Dr. Ray, 2015. So it doesn't matter whether the parents are well educated, whether they're from high income families versus low income families. Homeschool students score above average on the achievement test regardless of parents' level of education or family's household income. That includes whether or not their parents have college degrees. So you've got to remember, for people who say, well, but only a certified teacher could do this. You know, they've done studies, and whether mom has a high school diploma or a GED or a doctorate hasn't made a significant difference, usually within 1 or 2 percentile points on those scores. So whether or not homeschool parents were ever certified teachers is not related to their children's academic achievement. So and students who've been homeschooled usually score above average on the SAT and ACT tests as well. And a lot of colleges are actively recruiting homeschoolers nowadays because they know that they're self-starters. They know that they've generally been educated in an environment that has them interacting with their teachers. They're usually a little more self-motivated. They're usually the kind of kids that the schools are looking for. So the second question people usually ask is it legal? It's legal now in all 50 states. HSLDA has worked since 1983 alongside state organizations to help it become legal in all 50 states. So when people say, I don't need HSLDA anymore, well, you know, if it weren't for HSLDA, a lot of this wouldn't be here. So I like to continue to support them anyway. But we also want to make sure it stays legal, because there's always laws being initiated, always proposals to try to curb some of those freedoms. So I also encourage you to connect with HEAV, our state organization. They work tirelessly. They have full-time lobbyists that work in the General Assembly during legislative season. They have bill readers who read thousands of bills every year to find out if there's anything in there that could impact you as a homeschooling family, not just a homeschooler, but a homeschooling family. So HEAV does fabulous work, and they work around the year. So I do encourage you to connect with them. The third question people ask sometimes is, does this work? Well, like I said, there's just tons and tons of success stories out there. A lot of well-known homeschoolers out there. You know, most of you know have heard of Tim Tebow, and it's neat because he didn't learn traditionally, but he was able to learn in the way that worked best for him. His mom was able to tailor his education to him, and he was able to pursue his passions. And that happens with a lot of kids. You know, my kids. You know, I've got bunches of kids. We've homeschooled 17 children. We have 8 children of our own. Our 4 oldest were not homeschooled because we didn't know about home education yet when our big girls were going through school. But our younger 4 were homeschooled, as well as many of our foster kids. So the fourth question a lot of people ask is, what about socialization? Well, what about it? Fascinating story, an example of how this all plays out. One of my daughters was telling me recently that she was in line someplace with her 5 children, and several of them fairly younger, and somebody commented, struck up a conversation. Older woman in the line struck up a conversation with her children, and her children are pretty articulate, and they're very open and conversational, and so the woman commented to my daughter about how articulate they were, and how pleasant and polite they were, and how she was enjoying having this wonderful conversation with them. And she asked where they went to school. And so either they or she said that they were homeschooled. And the woman immediately said, oh, well, aren't you concerned about their socialization? And we thought, did you not just hear yourself? So depends on what you're looking at in socialization. When else will your kids only be stuck in a room for 7 or 8 hours a day, 5 days a week for years with people only exactly their own age? So, you know, I just look at socialization as learning how to cope with the other people around us, how to interact with others, and we can do that more readily when our children are able to be immersed in the world and not just cocooned off. So there's several books on this topic. Rick Boyer has a book on socialization. I think it's called The Socialization Trap, a good book. A lot of articles for you. HSLDA has a brochure for you on socialization that you can either order or you can find online. Fifth question that some people ask, will my kids be able to get into college? Well, the colleges are looking for, short answer here, the colleges are looking for your child's transcript, basically, and his college admission scores or placement tests for their own college if they have their own. So children all across the country who have been homeschooled got into college. My children have been accepted by every college to which they applied. They were all offered scholarships at by every college to which they applied, so it wasn't an issue. I've known kids who've gone to MIT, to Worcester Polytech, to the academies. I've known homeschoolers who've gone to Harvard, and my daughter's transcript was looked at by some people. I was doing a workshop on college admissions, and several of the admissions officers there looked, and so they said William and Mary, Patrick Henry, Princeton, a couple of other places, that her transcript would have been quite welcome. So they took a look and said, where's she going to school next year? So number 6 question sometimes people ask is, well, we're already in high school. Is it too late to start? We've had people who have started homeschooling going into 12th grade. So it's never too late to start. It is a little easier at different times than others, but happy to talk to you. Again, I'm happy to talk to families in my area, in my group. HSLDA does offer consultants from preschool through high school, plus special needs and struggling learners for our members. So check that out. There's also quite a comprehensive website. I've got allergy issues today, so I may be coughing a little bit. I apologize. So, all right. Seventh question some people ask is, well, what if my child has special needs? Am I qualified to do this? That one-on-one attention that your kids get when they have a special learning need, that one-on-one attention is just invaluable. I mean, it's just priceless. So again, we have a special needs section for you at the HSLDA website. There's all kinds of support for you out there as a special needs parent. We're working on helping a lot of the support groups to integrate children with various special needs. There's all different types of needs out there, but we're working on that as well. So I encourage you to, hey, Jessica, I encourage you to check out the special needs section. What kind of support is there? Like all kinds of things. There's support groups, there are co-ops, there are clubs. For those of you who say, well, what I'm looking for isn't out there, I have an article at hslda.org/toddlers-to-tweens. If you look in the newsletter archive, there's an article called Creating Your Own Opportunities. So if what you're looking for isn't out there, connect with your local support group. See if your local support group can help you make that happen. And if not, check out articles such as that for you. What does it cost? Well, it varies. You can homeschool with a library card and a Bible. It doesn't have to cost you an arm and a leg. I homeschooled 7 kids at a time for under $100. It doesn't have to cost a lot. I had another lady who spent $4,000 on one child. So it's really up to you. If you go to hslda.org/toddlers-to-tweens, under the curriculum tab, there's an article there called What Does It Cost to Homeschool? And that can walk you through some of the hidden costs, maybe some of the things you don't think about, and you can get an idea. I think the average cost is just under $700 if you were looking at curriculum and taking a couple of classes and doing some other things, but it's all outlined there for you. But like I said, you can homeschool with a library card and the Bible. If you don't have a Bible, you can probably get it at the library. So if you got a library card, you should be golden. But it doesn't have to cost an arm and a leg. And how will I get it all done? I do several different workshops on time management for busy homeschool parents. But the first year I homeschooled, I used a correspondence course for my kids the first year because I didn't know anything about homeschooling. And I bought which is fine. Some people love to use a correspondence course the whole time, but I ordered this from the back of a Christian women's magazine from some ad in the back, and I was only homeschooling 3 children at the time, but when the box came, oh my goodness, my kindergartner had 11 subjects, and so I just remember sitting down in the middle of the kitchen floor and crying because I was so overwhelmed, and I thought, I'm going to be doing this until 10 o'clock at night. But we were finished by lunchtime most days. My middle schooler might have gone a little bit longer in the afternoon on some independent work, but an hour of one-on-one is roughly the equivalent of 3 hours in a school setting because you're getting that dedicated time. So just keep that in mind. If you're working with a kindergartner or first grader, an hour of dedicated time is probably fine, especially for your preschooler or kindergartner. 15 minutes here, 15 minutes there with some brain breaks and some active things in between is plenty. So, and I can talk to you, I do a whole different talk on getting started. Please keep in mind, those of you who have preschoolers or kindergartners, our goal with our younger children is to give them lots of experiences, lots of discovery, learning. Their play is their work. That's how they're making their brain connections. So I encourage you to just give them lots of experiences. Think of it as you're building hooks on which they can hang their future learning. It's kind of like patting their brains with Velcro. So it gives them things to stick to later. If they have those experiences, then they can relate their reading and their learning and the stories that you tell them and the other things they learn, those other facts, to what they already know. Our goal is, as Renee and Mike Moseman term it in The Smarter Preschooler, which still applies even to early elementary, that we want to create an intellectually stimulating environment, not so much an intellectually demanding environment. And as the kids get a little older in middle school, later elementary, early middle, obviously then you're going to amp it up a little bit and maybe let them, maybe your expectations be a little bit higher on what they're learning. But we really want to have more of a lifestyle of learning. Try to think outside the school at home box and think of a lifestyle of learning, of your kids learning in the context of the needs that they have. So as they're, anyway, talk about that later. Okay, let's look at the Virginia homeschool statute, because that's really what some of you really wanted to know about. But I know there was some, I'm trying to hit it in levels here. So the people who want to know, do I even want to homeschool? We've hit some basics. So how does this play out in the state of Virginia? Now, there is a detailed layman's terms version of this in the appendix of my book, Home Education 101. I encourage you, if you have an opportunity, to go to Yvonne Bunn's workshops next week at HEAV on getting started, the Thursday workshops in Richmond at the Richmond Convention Center at the Virginia Homeschool Conference. They are free. Yvonne does a fabulous job. So I'm going to hit some basics here for you. There are 4 ways to comply with Virginia's compulsory attendance statute. And you can find this, if you can do a search. HEAV's got it listed for you. You can find it in Virginia's section of HSLDA. If you just do an online search for Code of Virginia 22.1-254.1, I'll say that again, Code of Virginia 22.1-254.1. That's the homeschool statute. If you back up one to 22.1-254, that is the compulsory attendance statute. And in there you'll see, again, this is not legal advice, just giving you some information, and you do with this what you want. But the compulsory attendance age in Virginia is 5. So if your child is 5 by September 30th at the start of the school year, or hasn't reached 18 yet, then that child falls under compulsory attendance. Hey y'all, hi Nancy. So this is really, since Nancy's here, I'm going to tell you, this is really informal. I was taking a nap, got up, did this. This is like almost not scripted. I've got a little basic outline that I give people when I do a class at the house. So just covering some bases for my local gals who have asked me, we usually just do this in my house. It's a little easier at home when I'm looking at you. But so the compulsory attendance age is 5. There is an opt-out provision. So usually get into that a little bit more, but in Virginia, compulsory attendance age is 5 by September 30th. If your child isn't yet 6 by September 30th, you have the option of keeping him at home one more year. The way the law is written is if you as the parent feel that your child is not academically or psychologically or emotionally ready to attend school yet, you can send a note to the school board and let them know that you're opting him out for a year, and that exempts you from compulsory attendance for that year. Now, during that year, you can continue to let them do a lot of play-based learning if you want. You can start that kindergarten type of material if you want, and then the following year, you can either call him a kindergartner in your mind, or because you don't have to tell them what grade level he is, or you can consider him a first grader. Kindergarten is not mandatory in the state of Virginia. So, but you're going to hear me say school board and superintendent's office. The difference is when you're dealing with the compulsory attendance statute, you're talking about the school board because the school board oversees compulsory education in Virginia. When you're talking about homeschool paperwork, your notice of intent, your testing and things like that, we're talking about the superintendent's office because the superintendent oversees home education in Virginia. Now, in most of your cases, I think probably in all of our counties right here, it's the same place. But for legal purposes, just wanted to make sure that you knew that, that if you want to be technical, that's why you'll hear me use both terms. And you may wonder, well, you just told me to send something to the school board. So your opt-out note would go to the school board office because you're letting them know that you're exempting yourself from compulsory attendance for that first year. Now, there are 4 ways to comply with compulsory attendance in Virginia. The first is to send your child to public school. And again, I'm just giving you an outline of what you can find in the law. So double check, read it for yourself. Again, 22.1-254. The first is to send your child to public school, which can include nowadays public school at home through one of those online programs. The second is to send your child to a private, denominational, or parochial school. Now, in the past, that has been understood to be send your kid to school, a brick and mortar school. About 2 summers ago, the law was amended to include in that definition distance learning. So that kind of opens up a whole different option for us there, and we'll talk about that in a minute. The third is to have your child taught by a certified tutor. And in Virginia, that's going to be someone with a teaching credential. There's a definition for you in the law. You can find that there. Now, and this can be the parent. If the parent is a certified in Virginia teacher, then you can utilize this. So there are quite a few parents who have teaching certificates who file and say, I will be teaching my child under the certified tutor provision, and then list it, write it all out in accordance with the compulsory attendance statute of the state of Virginia. You do not want to use the term homeschooling in that. Homeschooling is being a certified tutor and working with your child at home is not the same legally as, for their purposes, as homeschooling. So if you say homeschooling in there, or if you send in a notice of intent and say certified tutor, they're going to expect your test scores at the end of the year. So you're not wanting to confuse this with the homeschooling statute, totally separate. So we've got public school, private school, certified tutor, and the fourth is the homeschooling statute. And under the homeschooling statute, there are several different options we'll talk about in a second. So, and that's what you're talking about when we say you're sending in an NOI, or a notice of intent. Now, there's also in the state of Virginia, which is very unique to us, there's a religious exemption. And under the religious exemption, which is, again, part of the compulsory attendance statute, it's not a homeschooling thing. This is available to anybody. It's not a homeschool thing. The religious exemption statute basically says, it was written years ago, before we had, this actually predates the homeschool statute. So before we had a homeschooling statute with a notice of intent, we had religious exemption for families such as Mennonite families who literally do not provide a formal education for their children after a certain point. So the religious exemption statute says that it is against our families' bona fide religious beliefs. Doesn't say what denomination, what doesn't have to be Christian. It just says against our family's bona fide religious beliefs for our child to attend school. Now, that has been generally accepted to mean public school. If your child is going to private school, that does not preempt you from utilizing this. This is generally, I like to look at it as, it is a, for my family, you would have to haul me off to jail before I would put my kids in public school. This can't be a philosophical or moral thing. It has to be religion-based. So for example, it can't be, well, if they just didn't teach sex ed, I could send my kids. Or if they would just change the school day, or if they could keep my kids safe, then those aren't grounds for religious exemption. That's just a moral and philosophical difference. But anyway, so if you have any questions on that, HEAV has a whole section you can check out on that. HSLDA will be happy to look at your paperwork if you're a member and help you with that. We did talk about, now back up to the religious exemption. You will often hear people say, I homeschool under religious exemption. Practically speaking, that's correct. In my personal opinion, again, this is not legal advice. In my personal opinion, if I'm looking at the law, religious exemption is an exemption from the compulsory attendance statute. Homeschooling is part of the compulsory attendance statute. So I'm either homeschooling or I'm religiously exempt, as far as the definition goes. But from a practical perspective, I am teaching my child at home under religious exemption. So that's just kind of one of those weird nuances. My personal opinion, take it up with an attorney if you like. Opt-out provision, we talked about that a little bit. If your child isn't yet 6 by September 30th, you have that option of not filing anything with them the next year. All right, so the fourth option is the homeschooling statute, and that's where we're talking about filing a notice of intent. So who has to file a notice of intent? Anybody under that compulsory attendance age, within that compulsory attendance age. The notice of intent is simply a, you don't have to fill out a form. There's nothing that says you have to fill out a form, but if you want to know what by law needs to be turned in, HEAV has a form for you at heav.org. You'll find that that's under the law. There's a notice of intent form you can just print off, and the forms on there, the blanks, contain only what is required by law. Sometimes if you contact your county or your city, they'll say, let me send you a form, and they'll ask you for all kinds of stuff that you may or may not need to be including. So I would encourage you to use the HEAV form, or just write it out in letter format. Nothing says, or just make your own on a piece of paper. Nothing says you have to use a particular form. It does need to be filed by August 15th. Excuse me. I'm going this like in the air here. I'm using some basic notes that are who, what, when, where. I don't even have any answers here. So you're looking at sending your notice of intent in by August 15th. Took a nap, shouldn't have done that, got the fuzzy brain. So that generally means you need it to be postmarked by then. I like to make sure that it's on their desk by then. I always recommend that you send it certified return receipt so that you have documentation. The law says you need to notify them of your intent to provide home instruction. That means they have to have gotten the letter. That's the notice. I'm not asking for permission. I'm not applying for approval. I'm only required to notify them of my intent. When I get that little green card back that says somebody signed for this, I have complied. So I want to keep that little form. I don't want to find out that something happened to it between the front desk and the back room. If I'm hand carrying it in, I'm going to have a little piece of paper with me that says, I attest that I have received Mrs. Bentley's homeschool paperwork for XYZ children on this date. And it's all written out, so all they have to do is sign it and date it. So like I said, somebody drops it between here and the back room, not my problem. I've got that taken care of. So, alrighty, who, what, when, where. If you need to know where to send your paperwork, HEAV has a list for you of the different superintendent's offices. If you go to heav.org, click on, I think it's on the law section, it'll say DOE superintendents, addresses for superintendents. And there's just a list. I like to use that list because that is updated by the Department of Education. So it's not a matter of somebody made a list someplace and it didn't get updated. This one is actually updated by the DOE. So we know that we have the most accurate information. So we send that there. If you have any questions as we go along, if you move into Virginia after August 15th, actually the law says, or as soon as practicable. So technically, if you come into Virginia after that, you have, most people will say about 30 days. It does say to notify the superintendent's office as soon as practicable and comply with the law within 30 days. So if you get in there, you send them the notice. This used to be more important when we had a bunch of other parts and pieces we had to send. Now it's really not hard to just send the whole packet at once, unless you moved in and can't find your diploma. So it used to be you had other stuff you had to give them that you might not have compiled yet. But in the state of Virginia, all you're doing now is sending in that notice of intent, which is just a couple of things on a form or handwritten out, and you're required to give them a description of curriculum. For many, many years, that was kind of a vague term, and there were a lot of different requirements. So it was outlined several years ago in the statute that a description of curriculum is limited to a list of subjects to be taught. So all you've got to do is know what subjects you're going to plan to teach to cover at some point. So most of us are going to cover math and language arts and social studies and science, and we're probably going to hit on some art and music and PE, and some of us some foreign language. I mean, even if you're not doing PE every day in a structured format, or you don't have art class or music class, you may be studying art in the context of the history studies that you're doing. You may be studying music in that context. They may be doing music in a choir that they're part of. My grandkids are a part of the Shenandoah. Shenandoah University has a program for young people. So they study music in that way. So basically, just what you're trying to show them is that you are a great parent providing a well-rounded program of study. That's really what they're looking for. This is not up for approval. They don't get to say they don't like your subjects. They don't get to say you're not doing enough. This is just something to show them that you have a plan. They don't have to see what the daily plans are. They don't need to know how many hours each day you're doing this. You're just needing to give them this basic information. So, so after, like I said, if you move in after the 15th, just do it as soon as you can. It does say as soon as practicable, and then complying with the rest of the law within 30 days. So if you've sent them a notice and said, we're filing under option 1, I have a high school diploma, it's in a box and I'll send it to you within the next 30 days. That's where that 30 days comes in. You have a little bit of time to find any parts and pieces that you need, but you've notified them so that if somebody says, hey, there's a new kid in our neighborhood and I haven't seen him get on the school bus, then they aren't going to be so likely to come to you and say that you're truant because you have filed paperwork. So hopefully, Jan, that helps you out there. All right. So how do you do this? Like I said, the notice of intent. Let me get over to this other page. There are different options on as far as the statute goes. And again, you can look these up. I'm just kind of hitting some highlights for you. The first option one is that you have a high school diploma. It could be you or your husband. GED does not count as a high school diploma for this particular category. It does come further down. So if you've got a GED and not a diploma, don't panic. You can go further down. If you've got a GED from high school and then you went on to college, you can use your college paperwork for that. They're generally going to figure you if you've gone on to college, then that would be applicable. But so number one is a high school diploma. So you've got your form and you've got a copy of your diploma. I suggest make about 10 photocopies of the thing now so you don't have to hunt for it every year. It could be a transcript. For some of you, it may be a letter from the school attesting the fact that you graduated because you can't find your diploma. So the second option is that you're a certified teacher. Now you may be thinking, well, wait a minute, we just talked about certified teachers back in the compulsory attendance statute. That's true. There's a certified tutor provision, which is part of the compulsory attendance statute. There's a certified teacher section option, which is part of the notice of intent. If you check off certified teacher on a notice of intent, and you send it in, they will expect you to provide testing at the end of the year. So that's up to you how you want to deal with this. Just saying that in many cases, someone who is a certified teacher in Virginia will very often choose to not send in a notice of intent, but send in a letter of certified tutor option. So, but it's there, and we don't want to have them take it off of it. I'm guessing partly because we don't want to bring attention to the fact that there's that ambiguity. Okay. My personal opinion, don't really know what the reason is. The third option, it could be 1, I have a high school diploma. 2, I'm a certified teacher. 3, my third option is I'm providing a program of study or a curriculum. Now, I'm going to tell you what it says, and then I'm going to tell you what I think it means because of the way the law was written in the past. So I'm trying to look at the spirit of the law, not just the letter of the law. Do what you want with that. It says, which may be delivered through a correspondence course or distance learning program or in any other manner. Well, in any other manner is kind of broad. It kind of sounds like everybody could do option 3 because as long as you're providing a program of study in any manner, it's covered. However, this language replaces language that said you provided a program of study using a correspondence course off of a state-approved list. So because the whole reason for them rewriting this was to give us some leeway in using a correspondence course or a distance learning program and not having to jump through their hoops, I believe that in any other manner was actually intended to have to do with that packaged correspondence distance learning type of approach. So my personal opinion is I would use option 3 if I were using something where I was signing my kiddo up for something and they were, having accountability to the group. Maybe it's a private school that's offering distance learning, those sorts of things. So that's my take on that. You can read into it what you want to. Number 4, the fourth option, maybe you say, well, I don't have a diploma and I'm not a certified teacher and I'm not using a correspondence course or whatever. So how do I homeschool? The fourth option is that you provide evidence that you're able to provide an adequate education for your child. Now, that has generally meant in the past, it's bad I'm watching this because I miss you. I love you, Angie. So Angie's not even home. Her kids are all grown and gone, and so she's my sweet friend from Dinwiddie. And anyway, where was I? Sorry, adequate education. What they're really looking for here is verification that you are a literate person. So we have some different examples for you of letters that you can write. Generally, you're going to be letting them know the types of things you're going to be doing for your child. I'll be happy to talk to you on more detail on that later. I don't think that's going to cover most of you, so if you have specifics, you can either call HSLDA, call HEAV, or talk to me later on. But for those of you who say, I've got a GED, now what do I do? There you go. All right, so those are the 4 options. Now, the additions to all of this are, the law does state that, again, that you're going to be sending in, with that notice of intent, you're going to be sending in a description of the curriculum to be used, which is just a list of the subjects you're going to cover. And it also attests that you understand that by the end of the year, by August 1st, you're going to be required to submit evidence of progress. So we're going to talk about that in a minute. I'm going to do this as a little bit, so we're going to stop and like take a little couple second break and then go on, so that people who only wanted the testing part can pick up on that. The law does say that you need to make your immunization records available. You have to keep the same records that your child would have to have if he were in school. Now, Virginia does currently still offer medical waivers and religious waivers for immunizations. You can find those on the website at heav.org. If you're a member of HSLDA, you can find them there as well. But you are still required to have them, whether it's the waiver on file or the records. You don't need to just willy-nilly send them in. If they have a reason to ask for them, you do need to provide them. So then you're going to provide evidence of progress. There's 2 options there. We'll talk about that in a minute. And I just encourage you, there's a lot of help along the way here. There's your local support groups. Most of you who are on here, you're asking because you're part of our Winchester area. There's WAHA, the Winchester Area Homeschool Association. I encourage you to connect with WAHA. WAHA is not a support group. WAHA is kind of a network of different support groups and classes and other activities. So it's kind of a great clearinghouse for you to find out what's available. And when we do classes, like I just did a high school 4-hour high school workshop in March. And so we advertise those kinds of things there. The co-ops, the classes, when Classical Conversations is doing their practicums and things like that, they announce those things on WAHA. I also encourage you to connect with a local support group. So even if you're in a co-op, sometimes the support group's doing different things. Our main focus at Winchester M&O is Mom's Night Out. We also have play dates and classes and other things that come up. We were more focused on field trips and other things like that when we were Shenandoah Christian Home Educators, but we found that a lot of y'all were connecting with other groups, which was great. We just didn't want to reinvent the wheel, and what we do best is Mom Fellowship. So we do also through Winchester M&O, which is the 3rd Thursday of every month. You can find us on Facebook. We do also have, the moms will set up field trips, they'll set up classes together, we'll do other activities and things, but our main focus is on moms and dads. So, okay, are there any questions about these basics? Because this is not homeschooling for the world. I do 3 or 4 different homeschooling getting started workshops for conferences, but I just wanted to hit some basics for those of you who are in our area who are saying, hey, I've just moved to Winchester. I don't know what forms I'm supposed to send in. I don't know when they're due. I don't know what I'm doing. So for any of those folks here, do you have any specific questions? I'm going to check my chat here. I talk fast, sorry, you can listen to it again later and pick it up, but I know you're busy, so I like to get a lot of information in for you. So anything in particular? We've talked about the dates, due dates August 15th. You want to send it certified return receipt. If you have any questions about which option you can use, let us know, but we've gone over a lot of those options for you. Okay, all right, I'm going to switch over now to, let me find my testing. Oops. I think I covered you up here. Oh, bother. Now I'm backwards. Sorry, it'll take me. So I've got 2 screens going here. So let me see if I can move my screen here. Let's close this down. Do I want to change my thing? Save. I'll change those. I have no idea what that means. Okay, let's see. PowerPoint, testing. I'm going to minimize you guys for a second. Sorry about that. Testing. Okay, let's see if I can get you guys back now. Where are you? There you are. Okay. All right, let's talk a little bit about testing. Again, this is geared to Virginia families. So those of you who are listening in, I see I've got some of my buddies here from, I've got Gail Back, I've got, looking here, Nancy Manos, and a few others who are, you're not local. So I don't know, you may be here just to see how I cut my hair today. I don't know. So let's talk a little bit about testing. How do I know what my kids know? So, all right, nothing, as I said in the first section, nothing in this workshop is legal advice. I'm just giving you some basic information here. For legal advice, contact HEAV at heav.org, Home Educators Association of Virginia. You can contact HSLDA, Homeschool Legal Defense, or any other homeschool knowledgeable counsel, but just want to cover some basics for you as a parent. You can look this up if you want to check the law yourself. Virginia Code 22.1-254.1, subsection C, deals with testing. Remember we said when you fill out your notice of intent, you are confirming that you understand at the end of the year you need to provide evidence of progress. And they define what evidence of progress is. So it actually says the parent who elects to provide home instruction shall provide the division superintendent, remember superintendent because we're talking about the homeschooling statute, by August 1st, following the school year in which the child has received home instruction. So there's two ways to do this. The first is evidence that the child has attained a composite score in or above the 4th STAY-9 on any nationally normed standardized achievement test, or second option is an evaluation or assessment which the division superintendent determines to indicate that the child is achieving an adequate level of educational growth and progress. I'm reading these straight from the law so you can hear that. Including, but not limited to, one option is an evaluation letter from a person licensed to teach in any state or a person with a master's degree or higher in an academic discipline having knowledge of the child's academic progress, stating that the child is achieving an adequate level of educational growth and progress. Or if your child is enrolled in a distance learning program or a private school, a report card or transcript from a community college or college distance learning program or home education correspondence course. So if your child has a report card from an official type of school, maybe a community college where they're taking all of their classes, maybe they're signed up for a correspondence course, then that can count. Excuse me. So most of us end up falling under option one. But for some of you whose kids maybe don't test well, you may be using that evaluation letter. And then there's a handful of you that may be using the report card. Okay, so who has to show proof of progress? Because some people say, oh, it's the end of the year, I've got to test my kid, you know, he's 5. According to the Code of Virginia, then any parent who is homeschooling under the homeschooling statute, where you've sent in a notice of intent, is covered under this. But there's an exemption if your child was not 6 years old by September 30th. So any child who was 6 by September 30th at the beginning of the school year is going to need to show evidence of progress at the end of the year. I don't care if your child was in 7th grade. If he was 5 years old at the beginning of the school year, he doesn't have to show progress. It's not based on the grade level. It's based on the age. So, all right. Now, what if you didn't file a notice of intent? Or you're saying, you know, well, we're religious exempt, so I don't really care about this. A lot of times, if you're educating your child at home under any other option, you might still want to evaluate your kiddo's progress. I have articles for you at HSLDA's website at hslda.org/toddlers to tweens. If you look at the newsletter archives, they're right there at the first page. It says browse the archives. Pretty much every spring, I do a testing article for you. So you can find a lot of information for you in there. But you may still want to evaluate your kiddo's progress, but you have a lot more latitude in the assessment options and you don't have any deadlines unless it's a notice of intent thing. So, all right, so what is proof of progress? For Virginia's purposes, you're looking for a composite score in or above the 4th STAY-9. Used to be listed as the 23rd percentile. The STAY-9 comes from the words standard 9 put together, where they've taken the 1 to 99th percentiles and they've divided them up. So 1st, 2nd, and 3rd STAY-9s are below average. 4th, 5th, and 6th STAY-9s are average. 7th, 8th, and 9th are above average. So the 4th STAY-9 is the bottom of the average range. So if your student is in the 4th STAY-9 or above, he's golden. They don't get to say they don't like how well he did. It's totally objective. It is a score they must accept. So that also runs into about the 23rd percentile, but if you can get that STAY-9 score from your provider, that'd be the best. All right, could be an evaluation that the superintendent can use to determine the child's achieving adequate progress. Again, that could be that evaluation letter. I have a list for you, kind of a template of what you might want to include in that. So if you have somebody who's going to be doing an evaluation for you, contact me privately and I can send you that so that your evaluator has an idea of typically how that letter could be worded. So that may be helpful for you. Let's see what else. That report card, we talked about that as well. Report card or transcript. Okay. Now, even if your kids aren't being tested with a standardized achievement test, and feel free to put any questions down there. I'm trying to check the comments for you. Some informal indicators of your kids' progress. You know, you're talking to them every day. You've got that verbal interaction with your kids. You hear how they're doing. You're involved with them in their hands-on activities. You've seen their written work. Hopefully you've been reading their written work. If you've been using those subject matter tests, maybe you've got math tests or language tests or science tests in your curriculum. If you use those, we didn't really use a whole lot of those. I figured I saw them every day. I saw their daily work, but maybe you use those kinds of tests. Those are a good indicator for you. Maybe you want to see, you know, have you been setting goals for your kiddos in some of our Getting Started workshops? Informal indicators. It's been paused here. Let's see. Hopefully it's still going here. Oh, wait a second. It may still be recording me, so I don't want to do anything bizarre. Trying to reconnect. Okay, so let's see how we're doing here. Okay, I could keep talking because it actually may be doing something. Is it still running? Hey, Sam. Let me know if it's still doing something, because on my end it's telling me that it's paused my video. But I don't know if I keep talking if it's just going to suddenly load it all. But I don't want you guys to have to listen to me. But I don't want to miss a whole bunch either. Okay. It says consider moving to a better signal. I mean, I'm sitting in the same place regardless, so. Let's see. Are you guys still hearing anything on your end? Oh, so you're still hearing me. Okay, well, I'm going to keep talking. My end is telling me that it's trying to reconnect. So I'm just going to do my best here, and hopefully you guys are getting this. All righty. So you've got those interactions. So some people like to have those guidelines for the different academic milestones. If you want an indicator of how your kids are, because a lot of people will say to me, I want a standardized achievement test for my kids because I want to know what they know. Keep in mind that a standardized achievement test doesn't really tell you what your child knows. It tells you what your child knows compared to other kids. So yeah, there's just a lot of variables there. So this is weird. I'm seeing this thing rolling over here. If you would like to know what your child knows, there are some different types of assessments that you can do, that you can use. Happy to help you with those. Contact me privately and I can give you specifics because you'll have specific questions. Or there are scope and sequence guidelines or basic skills checklists. If you go to the article at hslda.org/toddlers to tweens, click on the curriculum tab. There's an article in the right-hand sidebar there called What Should I Be Teaching? And then that doesn't tell you literally what to teach, but it gives you an idea of how, for your family, you're going to decide what's a good education. And in the right-hand sidebar there's a list of various resources that you can utilize. There's the World Book's typical course of study. There's Luke's school list. There's Hewitt Homeschooling's learning objectives for K through 8. There's Robin Sampson's book, What Your Child Needs to Know When. What these basically all contain is, in various forms and fashions, it's lists of, kind of checklists of, for math, language, social studies, and science, from usually kindergarten to 8th grade. World Book has preschool to 12th, but kindergarten to 8th grade. What the typical student would probably cover, what concepts, what skills would the typical student probably cover in that grade level, in that subject matter. Doesn't mean you have to do that. You may look and say, oh, he already knows this and this and this and this, or we're going to do this next year, so I'm not worried about it, or I don't think anybody should have to learn that. That's fine. But some people just like to know what some of the milestones are, so you can be sure that you feel more comfortable, you're not leaving any humongous gaps. All kids learn things differently, and these aren't specifics. These don't say they should read this book and this whatever, but it's they should be able to tell the difference between fact and fiction. They should understand, be able to, tell you their name. I mean, whatever it might be. It's just going to be general. The kinds of things that you can look at, and some of you may teach those things with a textbook. Some of you may teach those things through play-based learning. Some of you may teach those with unit studies. Some of you may teach those kinds of concepts on your field trips. Some of you may just have a discussion about it with your kiddo and they've got it after 2 days. It's going to vary, but it gives you an idea that you've covered your bases, especially if you do things a little less traditionally. Excuse me. Okay. All right, so let's look at the test. Okay, so again, when does it have to be done? By August 1st at the end of the year. These test scores are due by August 1st. Now, a lot of people will send their test scores in along with next year's notice of intent. If you do that, you want to send your notice of intent early, not send your test scores in late. Your NOI is due August 15th. Your test scores for this year are due by August 1st, so you just want to make sure you get those in. So order your tests in time to get your scores back. Different sites will tell you what their turnaround time is. If you've never done this before, or if you're concerned, you may want to make sure, thanks Sam, you may want to make sure that you test early enough to retest if you're concerned how your student may do. And if you're not homeschooling under the statute, it doesn't matter when you test. You can just do this at your leisure. So, all right, so there's no requirement. I'm just kind of doing a who, what, when, where, why. On the where, there is no requirement to test at a specific location. There's no requirement to disclose the location. There's no requirement for you to tell who the tester is, the date you're testing, or the name of the test to the superintendent in advance. All you're required to do is submit the results showing that the student is in the 4th stay 9 or above on the basic composite score. So testing ethics would say that your student should be tested in his normal academic environment or a comfortable location. Sometimes you may hear from your local school and they may say, hey, we're testing homeschool students. If you want to come participate, we'll do it for you for free. And you may think, wow, this is cool. I can save 25 or 30 bucks by sending my kid to the local school. If you choose to do that, keep in mind the kiddos are not being tested in their normal school environment, so it could be stressful. They may have somebody administering the test who isn't homeschool friendly, and your results are going to the school first. So you will not have the option of saying, well, I want to do something a little differently because the scores weren't quite what I had in mind. Some people will ask me about kids taking the SOLs. Homeschool students do not take the Virginia SOL tests. They do not take the literacy passport test unless they're testing with the school for entrance into the public school system. So if you've got a homeschool student who's re-entering or entering public school, then yes, they'll need to take probably some of the SOLs to make sure that they're up to speed, literacy passport. But before that, homeschoolers don't take those. We don't want them to. Something came up in the legislature a while ago. In order to do that, they would have to give us the same curriculum that they give to the public school students, and we don't want that. So your kids don't take the SOLs. All right, why? The whole purpose of taking this test is really to be in compliance with the law. If you're just now pulling a kiddo out of school, so say you're just now getting started. So technically you don't have to, some of you are new here. So maybe you're going to start homeschooling this year, and at the end of next year, and you pulled a kid out of school. So we're not talking your 5-year-olds getting started. But at the end of the year, you're going to have to show proof of progress. Well, progress is how far you've come. You only know how far you've come if you know where you started from. So I always recommend to parents who are just starting homeschooling a kiddo that they've taken out of a conventional school to provide some sort of assessment, preferably the one you're going to give at the end of the year if you know that already, but at least some sort of assessment such as this to give you a baseline. Because at the end of the year, even if your student doesn't score as high as you thought he would score, usually he's going to score better than you think he will, but even if he doesn't score as high as you think he should score, if you can show, yeah, he may not be up to speed here, but look where he was when I got him out at the beginning of the year, you're showing a year's worth of progress. So it can't hurt to have that baseline. All righty, let's see. What are some of your options? The method of testing you choose is going to depend on your goal for the assessment and probably your family's philosophical preferences too. So Keep in mind, a visual learner may do really well on paper. A hands-on or an auditory learner may do better with an assessment, an evaluation, or it may be that he does fine with a standardized test on the computer, because now they've got the computer-based ones. But you may find that a very auditory learner or a very hands-on learner may do better with a test that utilizes personal interaction, or an assessment that evaluation that uses that personal interaction rather than that paper and pencil test. So in that case, you might choose to give that standardized achievement test first, sorry, to see how your kiddo's doing. Many of you may say, he didn't finish his material this year, but you're only looking for the basic composite score, the math and language scores. Many times your kids have made adequate progress in math and language, even if they haven't finished what you consider the curriculum for the year, because they've learned just through everyday living a lot of these concepts. So you may find that just giving that $25 or $30 test, getting those scores, is actually going to give you exactly what you need. But if you give it early enough, it does give you time for a follow-up if the tests maybe don't, if the results don't match what you've seen in his day-to-day progress. Maybe you think he's doing really great and he scores poorly. You may have it could be a lot of reasons. It could be, and we talk about some of that if you call me. It could be for a student who doesn't score well. Maybe he just doesn't test well. Maybe you need to try an untimed test to reduce the testing anxiety for him. It could be that he just, in many cases, he knew the math worked, but he wasn't fast. So every one he did correctly, but he only got half of them finished. So that's where an untimed test can be handy. Maybe your child was coming down with something and he wasn't feeling his best. Maybe he's got a paper and pencil test and he shifted the answers and everyone was in the wrong, he answered C for the wrong question or whatever it might be. So a lot of different reasons for that, but it doesn't hurt to do it early enough to give you some options. All right. When your student takes a standardized achievement test, if you've never done this before, and even if you have, please remember, he is not expected to know all of the answers. When your student has been taking tests at home, maybe he's been taking, hopefully you guys are still hearing me talking about testing here. So, okay, I have no idea. I've still got this trying to reconnect thing going. So if your student has been taking math tests or spelling tests or whatever at home, you're generally covering material that you've done in class. So you're expecting him to get them all right. The hope is that he'll get them all right on the test. The goal is to get everything right on the test. So for some students who have never done this kind of test before, this type of test, they see all of these questions that they don't know and they panic. They freak out. So, or moms, I get moms that say, oh my goodness, there was all this stuff I know he didn't know. It's okay. He's not expected to know all the answers. They deliberately put questions on there that your student shouldn't know. That's the only way they can tell how far up he can go. So the only way they can tell if your student is advanced is to put advanced questions on there. So again, just tell him to do the parts he can do. Tell him there's going to be stuff on he doesn't know. It's on purpose, just to do the parts he can do and don't worry about the rest. They do tell you make an educated guess. They don't get penalized for the wrong answers. They do get points for the correct answers, so they don't get penalized as much for the wrong answers. So it's actually to their advantage if they can make an educated guess. They don't just willy-nilly go through and fill in blanks. But there are practice tests available for you. We have a web section for you at hslda.org/toddlers to tweens. There's a testing tab on the top right. And there's a whole article for you that covers a lot of this information for you. There's a list of commonly used tests. There's some practice test information and test prep information for you. But again, other than understanding the language of things, it's really just a matter of taking the test. So there are a lot of commonly used tests. You'll hear the CAT test, which is the California Achievement Test, the CTBS, which is the Comprehensive Test of Basic Skills, the Iowa or the ITBS, the SAT or the SAT 10, which is also the Stanford 10. That is not the same as the College Board SAT. There's some other tests, the Woodcock-Johnson, which requires more interaction. That has to be given by someone with specific credentials. The BASI, the Basic Achievement Skills Inventory, is for grades 3 to 12. You can find all of these listed on that website that I told you about. The RAT test, the Wide Range Achievement Test, is very short, but it's very accurate. Does have to be given by a specific credentialed person. It's good for kids with ADD or highly distractible kids. So those are some of the ones that are generally considered standardized achievement tests. Some people will ask me, what if my kiddo doesn't read yet? I mean, what if he's supposed to read these questions? Well, there are several tests that are designed, several providers that have tests that are designed specifically with the understanding that younger kids may not read yet. So if you go to, when you're looking at that list on the HSLDA website, if you go to Seton's testing service, when they're here in Front Royal, if you go to Bayside's website, Piedmont, Academic Excellence, they all have tests that are designed for the early grades. In the early grades, the test is either, if it's on the computer, it actually reads the question to the student, or it's designed with portions to be read. The only parts you can't read to them in those cases are the reading questions, because that kind of defeats the purpose. But for some of these others, if you have students who aren't reading yet, then check those out. The Iowa test, the CAT, the Terra Nova, the CTBS all have read aloud portions, so that could be helpful for you. Some other tests, if you're not doing this for the standardized achievement test portion, then the DORA, and it used to be the DOMA, now it's called the ADAM. If you go to letsgolearn.com, they have several tests. Two in particular that I like to look at are the Diagnostic Online Reading Assessment, or the DORA, and then the ADAM. It used to be the Diagnostic Online Math Assessment, and they changed it. Now I can't remember what ADAM stands for, but it's a math assessment. So they're $25 a piece. They're done on the computer, and they're more of a tell you what skills your child has down pat and what skills he struggles with type of thing. If you want to buy one of those tests, I would recommend that when you go to the website, click on the sample parent report and see the types of material or information that's given to you in the parent report, just to be comfortable that you feel that it's going to give you something helpful. The PASS test from Hewitt is standardized, but it's not yet nationally normed. It's for grades 3 to 8. So if you have a student who is in those grade levels, you want something that's designed to be, it's again not a timed test. This is not going to meet the nationally normed standardized achievement test requirement, but you could always talk to your superintendent and find out if he'd take it under option 2, which is any other assessment that can show that your student has made progress. The Bergantz is another one that falls under that. Excuse me. The Bergantz diagnostic inventories are a series of tests that HSLDA rents out to you at a discount versus other places you can rent it. The yellow Bergantz is for development from birth to developmental age 7. The green is preschool, pre-K, to about age 9. And then there's also a high school level one as well. And those can be given by the parents. And these are more of those, it's a humongous test. You spend a certain amount of money to rent the test, and you spend about $5 to get this little booklet. And the little booklet you keep. And so you just do the little section that's your kid's age level now, and you kind of keep track of things, then you move on. Okay. All right. The PSAT, which is the Preliminary Scholastic Aptitude Test, also the National Merit Scholarship Qualifying Test, the PSAT, in the state of Virginia, the law says that now not only do they have to accept nationally normed standardized achievement tests, but the PSAT, SAT, and ACT scores also can count for that. So if you have a high schooler who's taking his PSATs or SATs or ACTs, and you don't want to have to deal with giving an additional test, those scores can count. Do keep in mind the percentiles, the Stanine scores on those tests are probably going to be a little lower than if you took a standardized achievement test, because a standardized achievement test is taken by all kids of all different levels, all different ability levels. It's kind of one of those kids across the country have to take these things. So your child's scores will possibly be a little bit higher. Once you get to taking the PSAT, which is normed against cream of the crop college-bound juniors, or the ACT or the SAT, these are college exams, and these are generally kids maybe of a slightly different caliber taking some of these tests. So it's possible that your percentages may be a little bit lower on that, but so just keep that in mind. Okay. Some of the local private schools will also offer testing. So if you're concerned, you want your kiddo to take a particular test, some of the tests have specific administration requirements. It's the requirement comes from the test publisher. So for example, in most cases, the Stanford needs to be given by somebody with a 4-year degree, and depending upon where you're getting it, from somebody who has taken this 15-minute how to give a test video. So, but if you take the Stanford online as an online test, then many times the provider will consider themselves to be the proctor of the test. So there's some different variables there. The Iowa test, same thing. In many cases, the Iowa test has to be given by somebody with a 4-year degree. Although if they take it online, there are some providers that do not require that. The Terra Nova, the California Achievement Test, the Comprehensive Test of Basic Skills, there are no requirements for that one. So, all right, what about Common Core? Some people will say, well, I don't want my kiddo to take a test that's got Common Core alignment. Most homeschoolers should find any revised test not any more challenging than the earlier tests. Now, if you're looking at a test that has a norming date of 2010 or earlier, that predates Common Core. So there's not going to be a Common Core influence on that. As far as the later tests, and some of you, I know we may have some West Virginia folks on here, and you're looking at a test that has to be normed within the last 10 years. So a couple of tests, the Iowa test and the Stanford were just re-normed this past year. But those are going to have some Common Core influence in them. Do keep in mind that not all, how to say this, even though they'll have some Common Core influence, not all of the country has embraced Common Core, so it has behooved the test publishers to not make them so Common Core oriented that the kids, even the public school type kids or the private school kids who aren't in Common Core areas, can't do well on them. So at this point, it's looking as if any Common Core influence won't affect the answer your child gives. So it may affect how your child gets the answer, but won't affect the answer. Now, if we get to the point that the answers to the question have to do with Common Core process, then we can worry about that. But for right now, it shouldn't be a big deal. If you're looking for specific tests, there's a website called the Homeschool Resource Roadmap. If you look that up online, she does have, Tina has a list of not only curriculum and their Common Core alignments, but also their the testing. And you can find more information on Common Core at hslda.org/Common Core. Okay, so regardless of what testing mechanism you choose, it's really important that you test with accuracy and integrity. The rules are, you can read what it says in the test manual. If your kids don't understand what the questions mean, you just got to go through it. I mean, that's for testing integrity, because there may be other kids. The whole reason this is standardized, it's called a standardized achievement test, because everybody has the same rules, everybody got the same instructions, everybody got the same questions, that sort of thing. So we want to honor the time limits on the test. If it's a timed test, honor the time limits. Otherwise, it skews the results. If a timed test is too stressful for your child, consider an untimed test, the Stanford 10, the California Achievement Test from Academic Excellence, and some other tests. They're untimed. If you deviate from the instructions for any reason, you do need to annotate this for the scores, because otherwise it skews the results, and this does not benefit your kiddo in the long run. So by following the directions faithfully, completely, that helps preserve this option for homeschooling parents. So, all right, so some of you may be thinking, I don't know what those scores mean. You talk about percentile and stay9, what does this mean? When you get your scores back, and again, you're going to have little parts and pieces of scores. You're going to have language. You're going to have some verbal. It may have spelling, may have punctuation. You have different parts and pieces. But there should be a language composite or verbal composite and math composite, or there should be, for some tests, it's just a basic composite score or total composite score. That's what you're looking for. It doesn't matter if your parts and pieces are the second stay9, as long as by the time you're done with that composite score, it's fourth stay9 or above. So the percentile ranking tells how your child did compared to others. So for example, a score of the 75th percentile means that your student scored as well or better than 75 out of 100 students in the norming group, not this year necessarily, in the norming group who took the same test. It doesn't mean your child got 75% of the questions right. It means your child's doing pretty well. 50th percentile is average, just to give you an idea. 50th percentile is average, and that's using public school students as the norming group. And so those are students who were taught by a certified teacher with a degree. So just to give you an idea, when people say, well, you know, what if I don't have a degree? The average homeschool student scores in probably the 70-something percentile versus 50th. So if your student doesn't score in that, that's okay. Don't panic. It's just kind of an average. But anyway, all right. So we're looking for the 23rd percentile or above. So how about Stay 9? Stay 9 ranking comes from, I told you earlier, Standard 9, Stay 9. It tells where your child's score fell on a 9-part standard curve. So imagine those 99 percentile points divided. There is no 100. Your kid can't do better than everybody who took the test because he took it. So, all right, so you're dividing that into 9 sections. So Stay 9s 1, 2, and 3 are below average. 4, 5, and 6 are average. 7, 8, and 9 are above average. So we're looking for the 4th Stay 9 or above. Then there's the grade equivalent. And I'll have people say, well, you know, my child is in 3rd grade, but his grade equivalent was 7th grade, so should I skip him? The grade equivalent, for example, it might say 7.2 grade equivalent, GE. That just means that a child in that grade or month, in this case the 2nd month of 7th grade, would have done as well as your child did on the same test. So it doesn't mean you need to skip your kiddo. There could be things in the middle he hasn't learned. It just means your child is doing well in that subject. So, all right, let's talk about retesting. Why would I retest? If your child scored below the 4th Stay 9, you may want to retest, or there's other options as well. Or if you believe his score was low for any of a lot of reasons, you might want to retest. As far as retesting goes, testing ethics say that the child should not be tested on the same level test within 3 months. So if you're going to retest, you want to make sure that you're giving yourself a 3-month window, even if it's a different brand of test. If it's the same level of test, it really needs to be done with a 3-month interval at least. So, so you'll want to either do that, or you'll want to provide a different method of proof of progress, such as an evaluation. An evaluation is simply an assessment of your child's progress by an educational professional or someone with now we know, somebody with a master's degree. And the evaluator will generally let you know ahead of time what criteria is going to be evaluated so you can prepare. We actually have, if you go to that hslda.org/early years, toddlers to tweens, hslda.org, it's the same thing, hslda.org/toddlers to tweens. If you go to that web section and click on the testing tab, one of the little options there across the top is evaluations and portfolios. And that will give you a list of questions to ask an evaluator, things that might be included in the portfolio that you give to the evaluator. In Virginia, you're not giving your portfolio to your superintendent. If you provide a portfolio at all of your students' work, it's going to the evaluator. So the evaluator can then write a letter based on evaluating your students' work. Okay, so who might benefit from an evaluation instead of a test? Well, first of all, young kids who maybe don't read well, don't read quickly yet, children with learning challenges, children who are very overwhelmed by testing. Maybe they're just, you know, very emotionally overwhelmed by the whole testing thing, the timer dinging, or the fact that they're having to fill out the circles or whatever it might be. So again, we have a list for you. I'm not going to go through this right now of things to ask a potential evaluator, so I'm going to skip over all of that. All righty. Excuse me. Other options for evidence of progress are that report card or transcript from a community college, a distance learning program, home ed program. Again, with everything you're sending in, I highly recommend make a photocopy of anything you send in and send it certified return receipt. All right. Think of the test or evaluation as a tool to assess your progress, to let you know the areas your kiddo's doing well in, areas you might want to do some more work later on. Maybe you couldn't care less about that. Just keep in mind that keep it the perspective that this is big picture. This is one snapshot of your kiddo. He may not be academically gifted. He may be gifted in a lot of other ways. He may be, you want to check out Kathy Cook's stuff. If you go to Celebrate Kids, I think is her website. She talks about many different areas of giftedness for children. She calls it, I think it's 8 different kinds of smart. So check that out, because you may have a kiddo who doesn't do well academically, but he does well in so many areas. So your child is more than the sum of his test results. So anyway, all right. I'm still not sure if you guys are hearing any of this. I've just talked for a little bit longer. Let me know if you have any testing questions. So I'm trying to check this all out here. Let me refresh my screen.